Gary, with that, thing number five, as we mentioned, we are working more investor education type topics, or if novice investors out there. The question is, if someone tells you there's gold underground, how do you know there's gold? And thing number five, we're talking about gold / investment research. Gary, I think goes a little bit without saying, but let's further dive into why it's so critical to do your own research, to validate an opinion, or to even know what you should be looking for.
Yeah, so this one and this image comes from my friend Raji Kabaz at Learn Wall Street. Raji and I ran Silver Arrow together for 8 years. He's one of my best friends, one of the best portfolio managers, one of the best investors I've ever known. Um, and one of the things that Raji would always do when we were working on something is say, we talk about something that people would accept as a fact, and he's like, "But how do we know?" And it was a great question, right? People tell you things and you think it's a fact, but is it? And so we got a couple of examples for you, and this should illustrate to you, whether you're a novice investor or a professional investor, the importance of doing your own work and being open to, you know, potentially that you're wrong about something. So if we go back to the 1990s, there was a Canadian company, it was a mining company called Bre-X Minerals, and they claimed they had found this enormous gold find in the middle of the jungle in Indonesia. Right? I mean, just and it made sense, right? Like nobody had seen it before, and the stock rose from 20 cents to $280. Right? I mean, this is people think, oh my God, I wish I'd owned Nvidia or Apple Computer for the last decade or so. This was unbelievable, 20 cents to $280 on the basis of this gigantic find. And so, skipping ahead, it turns out there was no gold. I mean, none at all. So the question is how? How did that happen? Well, it turned out that the core samples were salted. I'm going to explain that. So when you try to figure out how much gold you have underground, and not just gold, any mineral, you dig a core sample, right? I mean, you can't just excavate the whole world, right? You can't just pick up the whole world, sort it, and say, where's the gold? So what they do is they dig a deep core sample, and this circular drill basically brings up um it brings up what's underground for however deep you drill. And then they take a look and they say, okay, they drill however many samples, and they say how much of the stuff that we're looking for is in the sample. And if you have a certain amount of gold in that core sample, then you realize, okay, great, we have gold underground, we have a great find, we're going to get rich, right? It's sort of like the gold version of the Beverly Hillbillies. um well, it turns out what happened was the samples, the core samples were salted. So somebody took external gold and literally sprinkled it on the sample to make it seem like there was plenty of gold underground. Well, the whole thing was a lie. There was no gold. The gold had come from someplace else. The samples had been adulterated or made impure. And not kidding, somebody who was um, the chief geologist of the company, or somebody who looked like him, exited a helicopter in flight. And there are a ton of stories about it. One of the stories was it was just an accident and he fell out. Another story was, he was thrown out. Another story is he was killed on the ground and then thrown out of the helicopter. Another story was they just found somebody who looked like him, and that person was sent out of a helicopter. The point of all this is it turned into a gigantic mess for everybody, both on a financial and a personal level. When somebody tells you there's gold underground, now, what do you do with that? You obviously, you can't get on a plane and start drilling core samples in the middle of the jungle in Indonesia. That's not realistic. But, you sort of have to figure out, does this make sense? What do I know? What do I not know? And realize that the risk of a property that hasn't started producing is very different from one where they are producing gold or copper or uranium or whatever it is you're digging for underground. And it's all right to take those high risk flyers, but the way you control that is with position size. You don't believe people when they tell you something like that you can't confirm. And if you feel like you want to take a position, You take a 0.5% position, a 1% position in something like that. The problem with Bre-X was people ended up with huge positions, and it created a gigantic problem for people. Now, that's one of those complicated things where it's really easy for somebody to say, hey, okay, but how could we know? And that's a fair point, right? None of us were getting, I mean, I knew about this. I wasn't invested in it, but none of us were getting on planes, dropping out of helicopters with parachutes, into the Indonesian jungle to drill our own core samples. But there are examples like this in the hedge fund business. And, back in 2012, I went to an investment conference, and, there's a hedge fund manager there who gave a great presentation on Viacom. And at the time, every large hedge fund had massive positions in Viacom, CBS, and Disney. But the reason they owned Disney, it wasn't because of the theme parks. They owned Disney because Disney owned ABC and ESPN. So everybody had these huge bets on linear TV, which linear TV is just, TV 15 years ago, right? That's all it was. And I did some work on this and realized, wait a minute, this doesn't look right. And I called a friend of mine who was a partner at a multi-billion-dollar fund that I knew owned Viacom and CBS. And I said to him, how did you get comfortable with the risk of streaming television, YouTube, Hulu, Netflix, piracy, DVR powered commercial avoidance? Like, how did you get comfortable with those risks? And his answer was, I haven't thought about it. And so, Rob, what was happening was every single hedge fund that owned these things, they were all talking to each other and they were all believing each other. But, everybody listening to this right now, they're all like, well, yeah, of course, streaming television has changed everything. Of course, nobody's watching regular TV and watching commercials. We're all watching YouTube or Netflix, and, or people are illegally downloading, or, people are using streaming television as a way of avoiding having to watch TV with commercials by appointment. But the thing about all this is you could have known all this in 2012. People knew what Netflix was and Hulu and YouTube. We knew what these things were in 2012. You just had a bunch of people talking to each other, believing each other, who weren't looking anyplace else. And that's the whole point, right? If somebody smart tells you something, they may be smart, but they may be talking to each other instead of doing the real work. And so, is it hard to figure out how much gold is in the Indonesian jungle? Yeah, that's really hard. And if you're going to do that, keep it small. But it's really easy to look at things like TV and say, wait a minute, is this business the way it's been for the last 50, 75 years? Or is it changing? And this was a situation where you could see the changes coming from years ago. You could see it coming, years at a time. And, with what Raji and I did was we produced a 50-page white paper called TV is Next, explaining how linear TV was going to fall apart. And within 2 to 3 years, Viacom, CBS, Disney, they all got hammered horribly because the old linear TV, nobody wants to watch television via appointment. You want to watch the show you want to watch when you want to watch it. You don't want to have to be in front of the TV at 8:30 and deal with 18 minutes of commercials an hour. No one wants to do that anymore. And so sometimes these things are easy to see. You just have to be willing to take a fresh look at it with your own fresh eyes and be skeptical of things and be willing to do your own work and dig into these things. And so, it's a really long way of saying, if you're going to commit capital on something, spend some time researching it. And, I know it seems hard, but if you understand how you like to watch TV, you could have figured out Viacom was a sell in 2012.
There are signs everywhere. That concludes this week's version of the 5 things, the We Pivoted Bigly issue. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in, whether on YouTube, wherever else we might have it. Actually, YouTube's the main one, right? YouTube Shorts will have these clipped up all over. We ask that you please visit our website, deepknowledgeinvesting.com. Sign up for a free subscription where you'll be notified of all new content material that's out there. And thank you to our premium subscribers, as always, for allowing us to put time back into the business and get you more data, more insights, and more research on those positions that DKI has identified as high alpha positions in your portfolio. Gary, any closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, first of all, I always like to thank the people who've taken the time to watch this. We really appreciate you. Thanks for spending your time with us. And typically in this spot, I always make a point of acknowledging the incredible work our interns, Andrew Brown and Alex Petro, do on the 5 things. Their work here is incredible. This week, I think they did about 90% of the work on this. Great job, guys. But I had a really terrific experience over the weekend, Rob. We had an event here in Connecticut, and 3 of my former interns made the trip to come spend the afternoon with me and a member of the DKI Board of Advisors. And, we just had a great day together. And, we talk a lot about Andrew and Alex and the great work they do, but there were, 7, 8 of these guys who came before Andrew and Alex, and they all contributed their time and their effort and their work and their intellect. There is now a multi-year long line of DKI interns who have not only graduated from college, but gone on to get great jobs in finance. They stay in touch with me. I talk to them. One of them just got a new job and we had a chance to catch up in person, and he's going to be starting in 2 weeks. We've had some terrific people, some terrific young people contribute to the work that we do here. I'm grateful to all of them, and I'm proud of every single one of them. And guys, it was great seeing you over the weekend. Andrew, Alex, great work this week, and we'll see all of you guys next week. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.